This is a fictional role play. All people, places, and events are fabricated. Hi, Nancy. Thanks so much for making it in today. Did you have any issues finding the place?
No, it was actually pretty easy to find. So it was no issue getting here at all.
Good. I'm glad to hear you didn't have any issues. So I was able to get a chance to speak with Mary, who had talked to you a little bit about the referral process and how some of the information that she gathered at the intake would be shared with me prior to your first session to be able to kind of get a head start on where we were kind of looking to go with our sessions. So I did meet with her. However, I kind of wanted to get a personal viewpoint from you of what you kind of feel like your primary stressors are right now.
I don't even know where to start with that. I just feel like there's so much. I, my husband has not had a job in really over 4 years now. He's not been able to hold a steady job. He never, come to think of it, really ever has, but he just, he is doing this like vocational rehab program, but he's not making any money. He's not bringing anything in. And I'm on disability, so we pretty much survive off of that, which isn't much. So financially, we're just a mess. And, that just, I think, probably makes everything worse. I've got 2 kids, and one's 18, Rena, and she just isn't applying herself or doing anything with herself, and I'm worried about that. And then I have my 12-year-old son, Michael, and he is very, very sick little boy. He's always been really sick, and I worry about him constantly. And I just feel like I have a lot on my plate, and I want to do more. I want to help more, but I hurt my back years ago when I was working as a nurse, and I just have horrible, horrible, debilitating pain at times. And so I just think everything just has just accumulated, and I'm just kind of to my breaking point.
Sure. So it sounds like you have been experiencing a lot of stressors related to a lot of the situations that your family members are in. And it kind of feels like that situation with your back pain, it really kind of makes you feel like you are helpless at times and maybe you're doing the most you can with what you have. Does that sound kind of what you think is going on?
Yes, helpless is probably the perfect word for it. I hate it, but that's exactly how I feel.
Mhm. So can you tell me, is there anything in particular that you feel like you're really good at, Nancy?
Well, I was always really good at taking care of people. Um, I loved nursing, and I always did really good in school. So that is something that's always been um, just a desire to go back to school. Fortunately, I have this disability and all the issues my family's facing. It just seems like that would be impossible. But I'm definitely a take charge type person. So I'm kind of the one who keeps everything together. And if we're in a crisis, or some things, I feel like I'm always the one to hold everything together. So, and I have always been good at that. Maybe that comes from working in a hospital setting. I don't know, but I guess that would be it.
And is that something that you take pride in being good at?
Can you repeat the question?
Sorry. Is that something that you feel like you take pride in being good at, or is that something that you feel like is more burdensome?
I guess it's a little bit of both. I was always really proud of my career of being a nurse. Just the work it did give me a lot of, a big sense of pride. And um, but at the same time, I feel like even though I'm the one, in a stressful or a crisis situation, I'm the one that, again, keeps it all together. I'm also just kind of tired of, not having any help and feeling like it's all on my shoulders. So
So you
yes.
you have enjoyed it. It's just gotten to the point where almost you feel like you can't turn it off and it's expected of you. So it's kind of got you to the point where you're tired and overwhelmed. And, just like anything, they say too much of a good thing can turn into a bad thing. So maybe it's just kind of, you probably need a little bit of a break. It's kind of where I'm sensing that is,
Yeah.
is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, I definitely, I feel kind of the weight of the world is on my shoulders, and I'm just, I'm almost kind of resentful right now of Charlie, my husband, because I feel like for so many years he hasn't had to really pull his own weight. And I feel like, I want to know, I just want him to, play, put in his fair share so that it's not on my shoulders.
Sure. Absolutely. And not to change the subject, but you mentioned earlier that you just kind of feel like you guys are in constant crisis, and I just kind of want to circle back around to that. And when you feel like you guys are in a crisis, what are some of the emotions or feelings that you kind of take on in those crisis moments?
I think, initially, if in the moment, I think my nurse training just kicks in, and I really use my critical thinking skills, and I'm kind of it's just almost uh, an instinct to calm the situation and intervene and get everybody else calmed down, or try to find a solution. But then I feel like after the initial crisis part is over, I tend to, I don't know, almost feel, it's like I almost feel relieved because I knew something was bad was going to happen. And once it does, it's almost like, okay, we've got that over with. We've dealt with that for now. I knew it was something was, bad was going to happen. But then I don't know. But then the cycle kind of starts all over, and eventually I start kind of worrying, or, just getting really anxious about the next bad thing that's going to happen. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Would you say that you're experiencing anxiety all the time waiting for crises to happen, or would you say that you experience the aftermath of the crises causes you anxiety?
I guess I feel like a lot of it is before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I just get this overwhelming sense that something bad is going to happen. And a lot of times I even, I've even had panic attacks. It's like once it finally happens, then I get a little bit like maybe a temporary sense of relief. Just, you know, it happened and we got through it. And, you know, it's almost like, you know, just get it over with. That's kind of how I feel sometimes. But I feel like more of my anxiety is before it actually happened.
Yeah, so you're experiencing anxiety, pretty consistently beforehand, just kind of waiting for these crises to kick in. And then after the crisis occurs, you kind of feel relieved because the crisis has already happened. In that way, you're not waiting for it to happen. Um, and then sometimes your anxiety can get to the point of panic attacks, is what I'm hearing. Can you tell me, Nancy, when did the anxiety first begin?
um, Probably, gosh, I feel like I've been this way forever. Probably even as a kid, um, you know, um, I would say, yeah, maybe around the age of 12, you know, I was really close with my grandmother, and um, I think my mom was really distant. And so I kind of felt like um, that relationship in general um, was really stressful for me and caused a lot of tension, you know, maybe as early as like 12 years old or something. I remember having those feelings.
Okay. So some of your first memories of feeling anxiety relate back to when you're 12 and your relationship with your mom?
Yeah, I just never felt um, good enough. My mom uh, was just a very outgoing person. She was a very attractive person, and I just didn't get those. I didn't inherit those things from my mom. I was more, you know, into I was more book smart, and um, you know, just wasn't like her. So I always kind of felt just an uneasiness, like a sense that I wasn't, you know, good enough, and just trying to please her all the time. So, and I think my anxiety really started from there.
Okay. And it sounds like you and your mom have kind of had just a rocky relationship from that time on. What is your relationship with your mother like now?
Um, well, my mother is passed away now, so I don't, you know, I lost her several years ago. I never really did have a relationship with my mother.
But you would consider your grandmother to be really close to you?
Um, yeah, and I lost my grandmother um, not too long ago, actually. But I remained close with her my whole life, and my children did as well.
I'm sorry to hear that about your grandmother and your mother. Um, and so, Nancy, when you've experienced some of these stressors or situations that have caused you anxiety in the past, um, is there anything that you've done that has successfully helped you overcome the anxiety in the middle of the situations?
I think that's where I really struggle. I tend to just deal with my emotions, honestly, by eating. um, as you can probably see, and I've gained like 15 pounds recently just with the loss of my grandmother and stress with Charlie and the kids. But just that's probably a big issue for me, is I don't know how to cope with it. I tend to turn to food. I have probably my whole life.
Okay. So that's something that's been happening pretty much your whole life?
Yeah, yeah, I just, food was always an important part of my life. My dad worked at a restaurant, and the time spent with him was eating the food he brought home, and then going to dinners with my parents, and um, just food was always kind of an important part. And I think it just eventually turned into just something that made me feel better.
Sure. It sounds like you had some happier memories from your childhood that were centered around food, and it sounds like you are using food to get through these hard times because it might be pretty comforting for you. Um, Nancy, I really appreciate you being really open with me today. I know it's not easy to do that. So I appreciate that first and foremost. Do you mind? It sounds like you've been through a lot in your life and you've come through a lot of experiences that have kind of caused you a lot of stress. What are some things that you've learned through this past experience that have made you um, so experienced to overcome adversity?
Well, I guess I mean, that's what I'm trained to do as a nurse. Um, and I take that very seriously. Um, you know, I'm trained to stay calm in stressful situations and to use my critical thinking skills, um, and to not panic. So I know that. Um, and and I think that if I could just um, find a way to tap into that and maybe get some support from more support from my husband, I feel like we could get through this.
Absolutely. Um, it really sounds like that you take a lot of pride in the lessons you've learned from being a nurse, and it's really something that's, really developed into your personality. It's who you are and kind of something that you stand for. And I really respect that because it's kind of what's helped you get through a lot of these situations thus far. From what it sounds like, you kind of can handle a lot and you've been through a lot of stressful situations. And people like me might consider you to be a very strong person. But I also want to encourage you that just because you're strong doesn't mean that um, it's a bad thing to ask for help or to seek answers from other people when we're stressed and bogged down. So um, I think that that's definitely an achievable goal. It sounds like what you probably would really like to focus on is kind of seeing how the other members of your family can help support you for a change. And maybe we can discuss that a little bit further next week because you've just done such a great job of opening up and sharing with me. I really look forward to teaming up together during your next session and figuring out some ways that we can move forward and kind of take some of these stressors and approach them head on. Uh, does that sound like something that you're ready to do?
Yeah, yes, definitely. That sounds good.
Okay, well, again, I just thank you for your honesty and bravery today, and I look forward to you seeing you next week, Nancy.
Thank you.
Again, this is a fictional role play. All people, places, and events are fabricated.